When I matched with Shelby, I thought I'd found someone truly special. We met on a Bumby dating app, just your typical swipe right kind of place. Nothing about her profile screamed bug lover, which was a relief. See, I've always had a deep, gut-level fear of insects. Instant panic. Shelby seemed perfect, and after a week of talking, I was hooked. So, when she suggested we meet in person, I pushed my fear aside and said yes. It was just one irrational phobia after all. What could possibly go wrong? On our first date, Shelby brought along a companion. A Madagascar hissing cockroach that she introduced with a gentle smile. She stroked its shiny black-brown shell as though it were a kitten.
"This is Manny,"
she said, extending the roach towards me. I smiled, swallowing my surprise. A roach as a pet felt a little unconventional, but I couldn't deny her passion. She was different, unique, and I was intrigued.
"I like roaches because when they crawl on my arms, they tickle me.
She murmured, running her fingers down Manny's back.
And when I hold them, they make me feel happy."
Her smile widened and she tilted her head toward me.
"Want to try holding him? You might find it addictive."
I tried not to let my discomfort show. Shelby was special, and if she found joy in these creatures, who was I to judge? Tentatively, I held out my hand. But before I could muster the courage, she retracted Manny with a knowing chuckle.
"Maybe later,"
she teased, her eyes sparkling. The evening flowed, and before I knew it, she was inviting me to her home. She said it was close by and, well, the night was young. I was curious, a little smitten, and before I could talk myself out of it, I agreed. Shelby's house was small and tucked away down a narrow, dark street. I followed her in, and the moment we stepped inside, I noticed something peculiar. At first, I couldn't tell what it was, but then I saw movement, a large shadow shifting near the floor. I blinked, thinking I must have imagined it.
"Don't worry.
Shelby whispered, her voice soft and calm.
They're just a little excited. They've been waiting to meet you."
As my eyes adjusted, I saw them. Cockroaches. Massive cockroaches, each nearly 3 feet tall, skittering across the floor. Some even stood on their hind legs, chittering in a way that sounded almost like laughter. Shelby walked forward and petted one of them, like it was her pet dog. It shuddered under her touch, its body quivering in what looked disturbingly like affection.
"Say hello to my family,"
she said, looking over her shoulder at me, her eyes gleaming. "Family?" I stammered, inching back as one of the cockroaches leaned toward me, its antennae twitching. The sight of its segmented body, its cold, gleaming eyes, sent a chill down my spine. I fought the urge to flee. Shelby reached out, taking my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong.
"Come on, they're friendly,"
she said, her tone soothing yet oddly commanding. She guided me into her bedroom, where the scene only grew more grotesque. Her bed was covered in them, hundreds of cockroaches of all sizes, crawling over each other in a sea of writhing bodies. With a contented sigh, Shelby lay down on the bed, letting them swarm over her, their legs and antennae moving in a strange rhythm as if massaging her. She looked at me with a smile of pure satisfaction, patting the bed beside her.
"Lie down with me,"
she urged.
"You'll feel them relax you. It's like a massage."
I wanted to leave. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run. But her eyes held me captive, and something about her confidence, her sheer conviction, made me feel almost compelled to stay. Trembling, I lowered myself onto the bed, and the instant I touched it, the cockroaches began crawling up my arms and legs, their tiny legs prickling my skin. I clenched my jaw, trying to hold still. Shelby took my hand, her touch warm and reassuring.
Just relax.
She whispered. I took a shaky breath, attempting to let go of my revulsion, but just then, a cockroach launched itself from her shoulder, straight at my face. When I came to, I was no longer lying down. My arms were stretched above my head, bound tightly to the wall, my feet dangling off the floor. I tried to scream, but a sticky substance covered my mouth, muting my voice. Shelby stood across from me, clapping her hands in delight.
Oh, you're awake! Welcome to Shelby's amazing cockroach show.
My mind reeled as she put the helmet into the roaches, then grinned like a showman ready to begin an act.
For our first trick,
She announced.
we're going to launch Manny here through a hoop of fire, right onto our star. Ron!
No! I tried to scream, but it came out as a muffled grunt. I watched in horror as she placed Manny, the giant cockroach, into the cannon, lit a small flame in front of it, and with a loud boom, Manny shot through the air, passing through the ring of fire and landing on my face. Its legs scratched my skin as it clung to me, its cold, slimy body pressing against me. Shelby laughed, a wild, gleeful sound.
Let's see how many more we can fit.
One by one, she loaded cockroach after cockroach into the cannon, firing them at me with sadistic glee. They stuck to me, their bodies writhing and squirming, covering me from head to toe in a living, churning mass of shells and legs. I felt something sharp, a bite, followed by another. A strange warmth began spreading through me, a sickening, feverish heat that made my skin crawl even beneath the roaches. My vision blurred as Shelby's laughter filled the room, and a voice echoed in my head, repeating her words from earlier.
Welcome to my family. It all started with a single cat. Jason had found it one evening, this tiny, shivering ball of fur, abandoned near a park bench. He begged me to let him keep it.
It's just one cat, Liv.
He said, his eyes pleading.
Look at it, it needs me.
I hesitated, but eventually gave in. One cat wouldn't hurt, right? It was cute after all, and Jason had always had a soft spot for animals. But that's where it began, and it didn't end there. A week later, Jason brought home 5 more cats. 5! The apartment, which had once been cozy and clean, now smelled of litter boxes and fur. The cats scratched the furniture, knocked things off shelves, and left hairballs in the corners. It wasn't even about the mess anymore. It was about how out of control things were getting. I tried to talk to him. Jason, this is too much. We don't have room for all these cats. He just shrugged, grinning like it was no big deal.
They're rescues. They need me. Who else is going to take care of them?
I let it go again, feeling guilty for wanting to say no, but deep down something about it all felt wrong. And soon enough, it got worse. One night, I came home late from work. I stepped into the apartment and immediately noticed something was off. The air felt heavier, the smell stronger than usual. And then I saw it. A large metal cage in the middle of the living room. Inside were rats, dozens of them, squeaking and scratching at the bars, their tiny bodies wriggling over each other. Jason was kneeling by the cage, tossing in old bread like he was feeding birds at the park. I froze, my heart pounding. What the hell is this? He didn't even look up.
They were going to be used for experiments. I couldn't let that happen.
My stomach twisted. Jason, this is insane! Rats! You can't bring rats into the apartment!
They need me.
He said softly, his eyes finally meeting mine. They were wide, almost desperate.
No one else cares about them, Liv. You don't understand.
I didn't know what to say. He always made me feel like I was the selfish one, like I was heartless for not wanting to live in a zoo. But this was too much. Soon it wasn't just rats. The apartment became a nightmare. Cages, aquariums, scratching posts. Every inch of space filled with something alive. Birds squawked from their cages in the kitchen. Hamsters ran on wheels in the bathroom. I couldn't take it anymore. But Jason, he was lost in it. He barely even noticed me anymore. He spent all his time caring for the animals, talking to them like they were his only family. I tried to talk, to make him see reason, but it was like speaking to a wall. And then he brought home the dog. It wasn't just any dog. It was a huge, wild-looking mutt with matted fur and eyes that gleamed with something I couldn't place. The moment I saw it, I felt a cold fear creep up my spine. It looked dangerous, rabid even. "What are you doing, Jason?" I asked, backing away from the snarling dog. "That thing could kill us!"
Hey, it's okay. He's fine.
Jason said, reaching down to pet the dog's head. It snapped at his hand, but he didn't flinch.
He's just scared. He'll calm down once he gets used to us.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "No, this is it. You can't keep bringing wild animals into the house. We're done." But he just looked at me, that same pleading look he always used.
He needs me, Liv. No one else would take him.
That night, I couldn't sleep. The noise was constant, the birds flapping, the rats scratching, the cats knocking things over, and then I heard it, the soft creak of a cage door opening. My heart stopped. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. There it was again, scratching, scurrying. The rats. They were out. I shook Jason awake, panic rising in my chest. "Jason, the rats!" He groaned and sat up, rubbing his eyes.
Relax, Liv. I'll get them back in the cage.
I jumped out of bed, my skin crawling at the thought of those tiny creatures running loose. I grabbed my things and made a decision. Jason didn't argue. He just nodded, too tired to care. He was already trying to catch the escaped rats. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, but as I reached the hallway, I froze. The dog was standing there, blocking the exit. Its eyes gleamed in the dim light and its lips curled back, revealing sharp yellowed teeth. A low growl rumbled from its throat. "Jason!" I called, my voice trembling. "Get the dog, now!" But he was too busy with the rats to hear me. The dog's growl grew louder, its muscles tensing. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew what was coming. I screamed, diving to the side just as it snapped at where I'd been standing. Jason came running, throwing himself between me and the dog. The dog sank its teeth into Jason's hand and wouldn't let go. Jason screamed in pain, telling me to run. Through gritted teeth, he said,
"I'm sorry, Liv."
I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted for the door, my legs trembling beneath me. My hands shook as I dialed 911. When the operator picked up, I could barely get the words out. "Help! Please! He's keeping animals. Too many. It's dangerous." I never went back. I didn't want to know what happened after I left. Everything was so exhausted.
It was a nightmare. Just a nightmare. I sucked in deep breaths, trying to calm myself, but the lingering terror clung to me, an unshakable sense of dread.
Sienna,
My mother's voice called from downstairs.
take the food out to Rex.
Of course, the one task I hated more than anything. Feeding the dog in the garden. My garden. The one teeming with snails and slugs, their slimy trails glittering under the sunlight like some grotesque display. I groaned, but pulled myself out of bed, still shaken from the nightmare. I hated slugs. More than hated, I was terrified of them. Molluscophobia. It wasn't just disgust. It was something deeper. A fear that rooted itself in my bones. An irrational terror that made me freeze at the very sight of their slimy bodies. I grabbed the dog's bowl and trudged outside. The garden was exactly how I feared. Overrun with snails. They were everywhere, clinging to the plants, slithering across the stones. I could barely handle it, but I had no choice. Rex needed his food, and I needed to get this over with. I bit my lip and forced myself to kneel, the feeling of panic rising with every second. Slowly, carefully, I put the dog's bowl down. As soon as I set the bowl down, the snails began to appear, like they were drawn to it. One by one, they slithered forward, their grotesque bodies glistening in the light. I tried to be brave, but the more I pulled off, the slower I became. My hands were shaking and I could feel my skin crawling just from being near them. Then, I felt it, an itch on my arm. I glanced down and my stomach lurched, a snail crawling up my arm. I swatted it away, but before I could react, I saw another one. Then 2, then 5, 10. They were all over me, covering my arms, my legs, creeping up my skin. I screamed, the bile rising in my throat as I tried to shake them off. I could feel them on me, sticking to my skin, their bodies pulsing as they moved. My head spun with nausea, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I had to get away. I bolted back inside, slamming the door behind me. My body was shaking uncontrollably, and I rushed to the bathroom, tearing off my clothes and jumping into the shower. I scrubbed my skin raw, trying to wash away the sensation of them crawling all over me. But no matter how hard I scrubbed, I could still feel them, like their slimy trails were burned into my skin. Mom! I whimpered as I emerged, wrapped in a towel. There were snails on me. They wouldn't stop. She looked at me unfazed.
You have to use salt. That's the only way to get rid of them. They hate it.
Salt, of course. Why hadn't I thought of that? My mother handed me a jar of salt, and I clutched it like a lifeline. The next time one of those things came near me, I'd be ready. That night, I placed the jar of salt on my bedside table, close enough to grab in an instant. I needed to know it was there, ready to protect me. I drifted off to sleep, but it wasn't long before I woke again. This time, it wasn't a nightmare. It was real. I felt it. A snail slowly making its way up my leg. My breath hitched, my muscles locking in place as terror gripped me. I didn't dare move. It inched higher, the cold, slimy weight crawling over my skin. With trembling hands, I reached for the jar of salt. My fingers closed around it, and I hurled the salt at the snail. For a moment, I thought it was working. The snail recoiled, its slimy body shrinking in on itself. But then, it grew. My breath caught in my throat as the snail began to expand, its body swelling and twisting. Its eyes stretched out on long stalks, grotesque and bulging, while its mouth opened wide, dripping with thick, mucus-like fluid. And then I saw it, teeth. Rows and rows of tiny, writhing teeth, emerging from the gooey maw as it gaped wider. I screamed, throwing more salt, but it didn't matter. My legs wouldn't move. My body frozen in terror as its mouth stretched impossibly wide. The last thing I saw were those eyes, gleaming with malice as it lunged forward. And then, nothing but darkness.